Hello, friends. Welcome back to another edition of the Lovecast with Jamal podcast. You're in for a treat today. I have Peter Anthony, special guest coming from the great nation of Australia, all the way down under. And super excited to have Peter on the show. Been looking forward to this conversation, especially the subject matter of it. But before we get into that, just want to extend a welcome to Peter. Peter, welcome to the podcast.
G'day, Jamal. G'day from Sydney, Australia. You probably tell by the accent I'm Australian.
Yes, absolutely. I was telling somebody, I was talking to another podcast guest I recently had on from Australia, and I was telling her, I think it's, to me, it's one of them. It's an epic, it's an epic accent, very distinguishable, but very, there's just no other accent like it. So I think it's unique. It brings a flair to anything. For us Americans, when we hear Australians speak, it just gets our attention. So,
that's cool. That's cool. And we love Americans. We're close buddies. We're close buddies economically. We're close buddies culturally and socially. So I feel like I'm at home in your hands.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. But I always like to ask guests before we get into the meat of the conversation, give us a little bit, just for the listeners, a little snapshot of what it's like to be you. You're an expert in collaboration, which we want to have a conversation about that. But I imagine when you were a child growing up, and I don't know if you grew up in Sydney, but what did you anticipate doing what you're doing now? Did you anticipate being an expert in collaboration as a child? What was it like for you as a child growing up?
Oh, it was, I had no idea then. But I did get, I guess, an inkling of this when I was growing up. I grew up where I still live in Manly in Australia on the northern beaches, so very much a beachy community. And I grew up in an Irish Catholic family, and my mother in particular had a huge family, and each of her brothers and sisters had a big family. So when I was a kid, my mother was constantly asking her brothers and sisters and their kids and family to come over for big lunches on Sundays in particular. It was their big thing, cook a big roast for lunch and invite all these people over. And I was a very introverted kid. And on my walk home from school, my school was within walking distance, I'd stop by a small library, get a couple of books and come home and read. I just loved reading. That was my big thing. It still is. I still do love reading, but it was my big thing then. And I was very introverted. And my mother encouraged me to come out. So come out and talk to your Uncle Harry. He's a great guy. I thought, I want to read my book. Not interested at all. And she said, just come out and ask him questions about, because he was a lumberjack. He spent his career chopping down trees in the forest in Australia back in the old days when people used axes and like real guys did it. And I just talked, oh, well, what's a lumberjack? And he told me great stories. I loved it. I just asked him questions, listened to the answers. He was hilarious. He taught me a lot. I loved him dearly. And that began me on this quest of just understanding a little more, even as a kid, that conversations were really important. And if I had great conversations, I had a great relationship. I just began linking that up pretty young. Maybe it was my DNA, kicking in at that stage. So as a kid, that's what I learned early. And fortunately, I've got my mother to blame for where I am now. She still finds it hilarious, Jamal, because I tell her, she said, what do you do again for a living? And I say, I teach people to talk to each other. And she says, and they pay you for it. And she laughs. She thinks it's so funny. It's hilarious. But because for her, it's just so natural. It's just, that's in her DNA too. But I got that DNA from her, fortunately. And she thinks it's hilarious. But fortunately, I've managed to build a career out of it over the past 20 years. And it's meant I've traveled to 12 different countries, worked in them. And I normally arrange a holiday. If I can, I get my wife to join me afterwards. So I might work somewhere like Cairo and then have a holiday in Egypt. I'll be working in Shanghai and have a break in China or in the US. I've worked in most of the big cities in the US. I'll have a break in the area where I'm living. If I'm working in London, I'll take a train to like a city in Europe and spend a couple of days there. It's been a great life. It's worked really well for me because I connected with my DNA, and my DNA is very much this this collaboration piece. And I've gone back to uni again, or college, I should say, when I'm talking to you guys. Did a master's in communication. So I understand it intellectually. Plus I understand it through not just in the countries, but in different industries. And what I find, it's the same problem with a different name. I can apply what I'm doing in different cultures and different industries. So I'm confident that I can ideally provide your listeners with some values and a different perspective about thinking about their problems, or how to think about them differently.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. Amazing. You said several things I think are noteworthy. One of the things I thought was interesting is that, because I think people, when they think of conversation or the ability to have conversation, we think of introvert, extrovert, right? If you're
Yeah.
extroverted, it tends to, that's natural. If you're introverted, it's not. But what I'm hearing you say is that you were taught from an early age, even though your tendency was to, maybe hide away in the room, read a book, that you were encouraged to ask questions, to
Yes.
to be inquisitive and to ask questions. And another thing you said, I think, is really powerful, is that if you can have great conversations, you can have great relationships. And I don't think
Yes.
people would connect those two normally.
Yeah.
But the quality of your relationships are your ability to conversate. Can you say a little more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about the relationships in your life, whether it's a romantic relationship with your wife or your partner, or a friendship, or it's a commercial relationship, you can ask yourself the question: when I have the more quality conversations I have, the more quality relationship I have. I mean, romantically, there's a Professor John Gottman at Washington State University runs his love lab, and he gets couples to come in and sit on a couch and just talk to each other. And he content analyzes the conversations they have using this content analysis by verbatim expression. He calls it CAVE, and he can predict whether that relationship will survive or not just based on the conversation.
Wow.
So it works in romantic relationships too. It works in every relationship. You can think that way. You think, okay, well, if I'm interested in enjoying quality relationships, I need to understand more about how to have quality conversations. I call them collaborative conversations, because it is a collaboration. You are collaborating with somebody to both be better off as a result of the conversation, hence the collaboration idea. I call it collaborative. It rhymes with abracadabra, because there's a magic that happens for both of you when you do it well. And it's worth doing well because the benefits are extraordinary. They are extraordinary, commercially and personally. They're extraordinary.
Amazing. Well, I wanted to ask you, how would you define collaboration? What is your understanding or definition, if you were to give one?
Collaboration for me is where, whether they're individuals or groups, they get together and communicate in a way that leaves them both better off, and potentially you get a pro-social outcome too. You might get an outcome that's good for other people outside that conversation as well. So if you're having often if you're having a business conversation or a political conversation or a social conversation, you can also have a pro-social outcome too. That would be ideal. So for me, it's quite simply, it's a relationship, it's a conversation where both people are better off as a result of it being had. Hence, it broadens and deepens the relationship because you enjoy having conversations with this person. It's an enjoyable experience of and by itself, plus you're better off. So if you think of a commercial relationship, is where, okay, there is a commercial relationship where both people are better off, or both parties or both organizations are better off as a result of that relationship. And I call that a collaboration. Otherwise, it's a sale, like old school selling, where I'm selling you something, I'm better off, but you're not. Or I'm more better off than you are because I've sold something to you, right?
Totally. So the essence of a collaborative relationship or collaborative conversation is when we're approaching it for the betterment of each person is approaching it for the betterment of the whole. Like, so for example,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
I'm not trying to sell you anything, but I'm really trying to give value to you, and vice versa.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Or I'm even before I'm trying to give you value, because I may not know I can give you value.
Mm,
But I'm interested in, like, just say, for example, if it was a new commercial relationship, I'm approaching a new customer or a new client or a new company, I'm looking at having a collaborative conversation with you to explore whether or not this relationship could be mutually beneficial for us. Because
beautiful.
I obviously want an outcome. I'm not a charity here. I'm looking for an
Mhm,
outcome, and you're
mhm.
looking. So let's have a conversation to explore whether or not this can progress in a
This is a
meaningful way for
mutually.
both of us, or not. And if it doesn't, that's great, because
Mhm.
particularly in the early part of my career, I spent far too long talking to people that I'd never do business with,
Mm,
and I'd rather get a no early. I mean, I can take no. No's okay. I'm not that
mm,
sensitive. I can't take a no. And no's are good, because if it can't progress, that's great. Let's find that early. A bit like dating, if you like. You want to, if you, not that I'm dating, but my wife's listening to this. I'm not dating. I've got 5 kids and a dog and a cat to look after. But
Beautiful.
but it's similar to dating, because you think, well,
Mhm,
when I'm dating, I'm looking for people that I can potentially have a relationship with,
mhm.
and ideally a lifelong relationship. It's a similar thing, if you like.
Totally.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it's
I'm not.
super, super
Yeah, I'm not going to
interesting.
marry. Not going to marry everyone I'm dating. And if you think, well, if like, having a commercial conversation, ideally they're well qualified before I talk to them, but it may not progress. And you go into it with that intent. I'm not intending to make this progress. I'm not pushing it to progress. If it's going to progress, it will progress of its own momentum, because we can be of value to each other. So it's more like
Abs-
sorting than selling. I'm sorting through the relation, and I don't want to take on board it. I mean, my biggest sales force, Jamal, is my clients. My
mm,
clients are my sales team, and I've got clients
mhm.
all over the world that are selling me to their friends and
Yes.
internally. Not because I'm a genius, but because what I did worked. So I don't want it to progress if it's not going to work. I want to be sure it's going to work just as much as you are. I'm very keen for this to work. So I want to make sure it does. So if I'm going to fly to London or New York, or I'm going to invest time, I'm going to get 10 of your people together in a workshop, whether it's virtually or face to face. I want to make sure it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, everyone's going to know it doesn't work, right?
Mhm,
So I
mhm,
want to make sure it works,
mhm,
probably more, as much or more so than you do.
mm, mm.
Can you see
That's
what? So I'm not
really
trying to. I'm not trying to sell it to you. I want to make sure it's going to work.
absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. I know just even thinking about my own experience in my early days of life coaching, of being a coach, I it took me a long time to realize the kinds of people that I would actually be helpful to. And I had a
Yes.
vested interest.
Yeah.
You know, obviously I'm motivated. I want to be helpful. Part of, you know, what motivates me is to add value and help people transform their lives. Again, I have found, you know, that my biggest sales team is the folks I've worked with for that very
Yeah.
reason,
Yeah.
because it works. But it took me a while, spent a lot of time working with people in which what I had to offer wasn't going to benefit them because they weren't interested in the kind of process that I employ. And therefore
Yeah.
it wasn't beneficial for them. It was obviously it was not beneficial for me. And that ate up a lot of time and energy. And I've really learned, I love that's very confirming, to learn to not be afraid to, if I determine, or if I gain a sense of clarity that, oh, this relationship is not going to be mutually beneficial, then I have no problem with letting that be what it is and moving on to the relationship that is mutually
Exactly.
beneficial.
And a lot of people too, when they start their business, and I was like this too. When I started my business in 1998, I just had a laptop on my kitchen bench,
Mm,
right? And it's really easy to have a scarcity mentality and feeling a bit desperate about, like, feeding mouths, making money, making
mm,
sales, and it's what I'd recommend is having more of an abundance mentality and saying,
yes.
if become the best at what you do in the world, or in your world, in your city, in your country, in your region, whatever it might be, and have the confidence that there's people in the world looking for what you're best at. So
Mm,
become really good at that, and become really good at delivering that outcome for those people, and
Beautiful.
then find them and have that conversation with them, and they're looking for you as much as you're looking for them.
Absolutely. I love that.
If what you're doing is unique and valuable to them.
Yes. And a
Yeah.
scarcity, I love what you said about that. Scarcity mindset will not allow you to recognize the kind of relationship. So if there's somebody better suited than you, if you have a scarcity mindset, you will pull that
Yeah.
person into your orbit when maybe that's not the best for either one of you.
Yeah, and you're meeting. I call it the corridor. You're meeting in the corridor. They're looking for you. You're looking for them, and then you're meeting, and then you're in that ideal environment, of which there are many. You're both achieving that outcome together. So you're going into it with that intent. But it is easy when you're starting a new role or starting a new business like you did in life coaching. It's easy to have that sense of desperation, and the clients can sense that from you. They can sense that desperation. They can sense that neediness. You think, well, you are undervaluing the unique contribution you can make to their lives, and that's not a great place to start. Yeah.
So good. So good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, question. I guess the question that comes, and this is something I've been thinking about, in regards to not just commercial interests, but also I think about this on an international stage in politics or in personal relationships. I guess the question would be, why is collaboration so vital in romantic, business, global affairs? Why is this collaborative piece such an important component?
I think that's a great question. I think it's important for two reasons, Jamal. One is that it's the essence of the evolutionary spirit. If you look at people like Eleanor Ostrom, who got a Nobel Prize in economics for her work on communities that collaborate. She calls it pro-social collaboration. You look at people like Rachel Botsman, who wrote the Masters in Collaboration at Oxford University. She predicted the rise of Airbnb and Uber based on the collaborative economy. When disruption takes place, the companies who collaborate best with their customers are the ones that will win. Hence, Uber won over taxis, Airbnb won over hotels. If you look at anxiety and stress, you look at one of the main markers for anxiety and stress is withdrawal from social support, and
Okay.
that's both a symptom and a cause of anxiety.
Okay. Can I just repeat that? Because I think I want to repeat that again. I think it's such a key point you're making here. So a cause of stress and anxiety, and also a byproduct of that produces stress and anxiety, is the withdrawal from social structures. Is that
Yes,
correct?
it's withdrawal from social support. It's a key marker. If you can think of stress as how I'm thinking, anxiety as how I'm feeling. If you look at any markers for anxiety and stress, one of the key ones, I withdraw from social support, right? In both. So I'm doing the opposite of a collaboration, and part of the cure, if you like, for stress or anxiety is quality relationships, quality collaborative relationships. And it's so that's why it's so important. And I was going to say the second reason it's important, and that's all one reason, by the way. The second reason it's important is that the Pew Research in the US suggests that we have never been more polarized.
Yes, of course.
And particularly and this is happening globally, but particularly in the US, it's a polarizing place to be. And one of the reasons for that is that the rise of social media means that you get fed more of what you already believe. So it makes you more polarized. It makes you, oh, well, I'm right in being red, blue, green, whatever color I am, because all of these commentators are saying the same thing I'm thinking, right? Which is going to reinforce those prejudices and make you less likely to collaborate, right? make it less likely. So that's two reasons why I believe it's important. And I think one of the reasons why my message is getting so much resonance, because people know, yeah, I can see what this guy is talking about. We do need to collaborate more, because if we are to get forward, we need to remember that collaboration is key in us achieving our objectives together.
Mm, so good.
Yeah.
Really, really good. Well, I would imagine, and that before you do anything, we all take certain, I like to use the words presupposition, but we all take
Yeah.
baggage. Some people use baggage, but we all enter a conversation or relationship with baggage, so to speak. Have you found that there are certain key things that are necessary or that make collaborative conversations or relationships succeed? Like, what are some of those key things that we bring to the table that can help us? Maybe it's a posture, maybe it's a mindset. What are some of those things
Yeah.
that help us?
I think the first thing that helps you is think about traditional selling and think of the opposite.
Okay.
Will be one. Yeah. Have a deliberate collaborative intent. I mean, in terms of the intentions, have a deliberate collaborative intent, like be famously, obviously, publicly collaborative in how you work. The second is to be authentic and take Brene Brown's advice about having the courage to be who you are with your whole heart. Like, just be genuinely you, and you'll build a better relationship. And the final one is to be optimistic in how you're explaining things to people. And if you're dealing, like what I'm doing is I'm dealing with commercial problems with people, primarily client and customer problems that they have, and cultural problems. And I am optimistic about the potential for them to achieve better outcomes. So that's the intent. And if you haven't got to think about it for long, or read for very long, or Google for long to find out that in any successful relationship or enterprise or country or society, it's the most collaborative that are most successful.
Mm.
We know that to be true. We know that being polarized communities and societies and countries and relationships are doomed.
Mm.
It's simple. It's doomed. I mean, so you think, I'm going to try this collaboration approach, even though I know in the essence of my evolution, in the essence of my DNA, and others to be true. I think next question becomes, well, how do I go about doing that? If that's the why, I think, yeah, and the why does resonate with me. This crazy guy from Manly in Australia, it sounds like this resonates. Well, then you think, well, how do I go about doing that? It then becomes the how question, like, how do I do that? Like, how do I do that in my everyday life, in my business, in my career? How do I go about doing that? Because the rewards are enormous in terms of personal happiness. The number one marker for happiness in positive psychology is quality relationships. The number one marker of profitable sales growth in organizations is how client-centric they are. And the clients that develop, the companies that develop what's called customer advocacy, a customer advocacy relationship where your customers advocate you, that is the number one marker for profitable sales growth. So if you're interested in growing your organization, think about, how do I collaborate better with my customers and my clients? How do I create a brand, a relationship that they're willing to advocate? Because we also know, Jamal, that 80% of customers who are satisfied with you are happy to change suppliers. So I get very anxious when I hear people saying, I've got satisfied customers. I said, really? Really? You like satisfaction? Really? You want a satisfactory, you're going to say to your wife tonight, oh, honey, let's have a satisfactory marriage. I'm interested in satisfaction. Or you say to your customers, you know what? I'm really interested in giving you a satisfactory service. Really? I want you to rave about me. I want you to be an advocate of me, because I know that's going to generate profitable growth. I know that. So let's make that happen. Let's make that happen. And it's the answer, right? The next is well, how do I do that? Right? How do I do that? Right? I'm sorry to be getting a little evangelical, but I love this stuff,
No, no,
right?
it's beautiful. I love it. I think it's so important. I love what you're saying here. Yes, totally. We're not,
And I,
and I love how you put that. We're not after satisfaction.
yeah.
We're after,
Well, yeah, I mean, if you reach into your soul and say, "What is my life about? Do I want to be like looking back on that famous, dying, the deathbed thing? Look back on my life, I had a satisfactory life. Really, is that what you want? No, that's not what. And also, it's not what makes you happy. I mean,
Mhm.
if ultimately, I mean, the Dalai Lama said that they said, "What's the secret of life?" He said, "Be happy and useful." Right? Be happy in
Yes,
yourself, be a genuine representation of who you are, work out who you are and become a full manifestation of it, and build high quality relationships and be useful. And
mm,
that's the secret. And Dalai Lama
that
got it
is
right, right? Be
absolutely,
happy, be
and
happy, happy and useful. Yeah.
absolutely. And when you're meeting needs, and which is, I think, the essence of a collaborative endeavor, a relationship conversation, when you're the goal is not sales in the traditional sense of take, which is a taking kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's, I really want you to be better off, and therefore I will be better off. We're both will be better off as a result of this conversation, or as a result of this endeavor. That's deeply, deeply fulfilling in life.
It is deeply fulfilling, and because it is part of our DNA, Jamal.
Hmm.
It's part. We are social beings, not social doings. We know that feels good in our bones, in our DNA, because it's the reason we evolved beyond Neanderthals. I mean,
Hmm.
one of the first things we learned to do when we got our brain developing from our amygdala was we learned to have conversations with each other, because
Mm,
conversations helped us collaborate and communicate better
mm,
with each other. Hence, we evolved. Us Homo sapiens evolved beyond the other apes that we were competing with at the time, because we had the ability to build communities, collaborate, and talk and share ideas with each other.
mm,
So it's not like a thing that comes out in 2023. It's part of our DNA.
mhm.
And when your DNA wakes up, when you are truly a full manifestation of who you are, biologically, physically, spiritually, that's when you're happiest, and that's when you're the most useful at the same time. So you get double
Mm,
bingo.
mhm, mhm. That's
You win
beautiful.
two jackpots with one ticket.
Really good, really good.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, in your experience, with this line of work and just with this passion that you have, what have you found to be the key moments of influence in a
The,
conversation or a collaborative endeavor?
if we think about this at a conversational level, you think, well, I like to call them moments that matter. There's moments in a conversation when you can feel them coming on,
Mm,
and I've found that there's 6 of these, Jamal. That you can sense them coming. And
mm,
the first moment happens before the conversation takes place. When you think, I'm making a decision before this conversation
mhm.
takes place that something is going to change of benefit for that person I'm having the conversation with. That's
Okay,
moment
so
number one.
the number one,
Yeah,
you make the decision ahead of time that something of
yeah,
value or is going to transpire, that that person will be benefited.
will benefit. And it's going to fall into one of 3 categories. Either going to be changing how they feel. They're feeling like you're an awesome life coach. You're thinking, well, maybe they need to feel better about their goals, or feel better about their life, or feel more motivated. It could be a feeling goal I'm after. I want you to feel different, or I want you to be thinking differently about something by introducing a fresh perspective to you, or I want you to do something different because how you're doing it now is not as effective as it could be, right? So I'm thinking I'm going to change one or more of those 3 things. But that's before the conversation takes place. We all know about the power of intention, and we know that's my intention going into this conversation, and that's going to give the conversation the direction and the energy that it needs to go in. That's moment number 1.
Yeah.
Moment number 2 is when I get face to face. Now, there's a ton written on rapport, and I'm not going to talk about matching and all those good things. All I'm going to suggest to you, Jamal, and to your listeners is you need to listen until you disappear. You listen until you disappear. So you're giving them, you're becoming present, like you're getting present where you are right now. and then you're transferring that presence to the person you're talking with, and they'll feel this. You get the big benefits of all that subconscious communication that's taking place. They get the benefit and the gift of your presence, which is why it's called the present. It's the best gift you can give to anybody. That's moment number 2, right? And that continues. So you go.
So when you say listen until you disappear, means literally you kind of, you absorb, your sense of listening is increased to such a level that your presence is all that's there. There's no, it's almost like they lose sight of the fact that you're there in that sense, and they get lost in sharing. Is that kind of what you're saying here?
Yeah. I'm thinking of it more from your perspective. You listen until you disappear.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. For them, you get amplified. Right.
Yes. Okay. That totally makes sense. So you lose sight of you're listening to the point where you forget, because some people are listening, but they have in their mind what they're going to say next. They're very aware of their own thought process. But if you're listening intently, you forget that you forget what you're thinking. You're just absorbed in what they're saying. And yet your presence is magnified on their end. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, exactly. So you're disappearing. And what happens often, particularly when you're in a stressful conversation, like you're feeling a little stressed, because it could be a really important conversation, a really senior client you're talking to, or a really crucial issue you're discussing, you'll have like almost a conversation you're having with them, and a conversation you're having in your own head as well. Like there'll be a couple of voices in your head. One of them is talking. The other one is giving you like a commentary of how it's going. It's like you're talking to yourself as you're talking to them. And they can recognize that you're a bit distracted, right? So you're investing your full attention, and then they sense it, and it begins a deeper level of relationship. Plus, it allows all your subconscious to start working. I love the way Carl Jung described this. He said, your conscious mind is like a cork that bobs on the ocean of the subconscious. So I'd rather be in the ocean than using my cork, right? So all my subconscious, because when you're having a conversation, are you really consciously choosing every word you're using? I'm not consciously choosing anything right now, Jamal. This is all subconscious talking to you, right? I'm not deliberately consciously using any words at all. I'm
reading
trusting,
a script.
I'm not reading a script or consciously choosing a word. I'm just talking to you, right? Now, that's my subconscious. That's my ocean. I'm not talking to you consciously, deliberately. So, and that's when the best part happens. And that's when it begins to shift. And they think, there's something different about talking to this guy or this woman. There's something, I feel different because I'm getting his full attention. I'm getting her full attention. So that's moment 2, right? And that continues. That continues. And as soon as you feel like the attention's back on you, just reset, get present again in yourself, and then give it to them. And just notice everything about them. Notice everything about them, like their tone, their words, their posture, when they pause. Just get really, really intently curious about everything about them. And also they'll get the benefit of the attention, but you'll get the benefit of truly understanding what they're saying, because most of what they're saying, as we know, is not words. It's all that nonverbal piece, and you'll pay more attention to that when you've got your full attention on them. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. I love it. So this is very rich.
And that's really important in the coaching chair, because I do a lot of, I don't do life coaching. I do a lot of like executive coaching one-on-one. And I know when I'm a bit distracted or a bit busy or a bit tired, I don't coach as well. When I can give them my full attention, it works better. That's moment 2, right? And that continues. But I had a client recently at a workshop, and she said, I was in Singapore, and she said, so how often should I give them all my attention? I said, only all the time. Only all the time. So, all the time? I said, yeah, only all the time.
It continues. Really? Yes. You don't.
It continues.
Yes. I love that.
Yeah. Give it to them all.
You don't switch it on and off. Right.
No, I don't. I've given you my attention now. Now I'm going to start watching TV or check TikTok. No. Only all the time. Yeah.
Right. Only all the time.
Only all of it all the time. Right.
I love it.
Yeah. That's moment number two.
It's two.
Yeah, that's number two. Yeah.
Two. And there's
You
six,
go.
right?
You go.
So
There's six. There's six.
yes.
There's six. So number three is to take the lead. And take the lead, not in the dominating way, not in a dictatorial way, taking the lead in terms of giving the conversation some structure. And again, it's a collaborative intent here. So, and you're answering four primary questions, like why the conversation is taking place, what outcome you think we can achieve together in this conversation, how you plan to get there, and so what's going to be next. Like, what is potentially next in our relationship in terms of where this conversation is going to take us. You might say something like, look, if I'm coaching you, Jamal, I might say something like, look, Jamal, thanks for agreeing for a coaching session. Like the reason we're meeting today is to explore how we can potentially explore client centricity as a way of profitable sales growth for you. So by the end of the conversation, I'll understand where you are with your clients or customers. You'll understand more about the client-centric approach. Then we can agree on a way forward or not. How does that sound? That sounds great. Fantastic. So I'm just setting it up. I'm giving the conversation some structure, and that gives me permission. It gives us some structure, and it gives me permission to lead us through that conversation. And you might disagree. You might put your fingerprints on. That's great. I just want some structure in the conversation, not just talking about things randomly, but giving it some structure. That could be 60 seconds in, it might be 20 minutes in, depending upon how much personal rapport the person wants to share with you. Some clients, I spend half the meeting discussing personal things, family things, sport things, or it might be straight to business. The fourth moment is the understanding part, which I love. This is my favorite part, which is understanding how they're thinking. Right? Because I like to take Stephen Covey's advice. He said, seek first to understand before seeking to be understood. Love that.
Yes.
I love that. So I want to understand how you're thinking, Jamal. I want to understand, well, with regards to this sales issue that you have, I'm really curious about that. Like if you're thinking about looking at it, if you're thinking about a new approach, what sort of things are important to you? Like, how do you think about that? Right? So I'm looking for those criteria or the ways you think. You might say, well, I'm thinking about something that's proved in my industry, something that we can implement globally, and something that fits in our budget. I might get those three things, right? So then I might say, well, I want to know what order are they in? Well, I think that I want something proved, like a proven approach. Okay, so that's the second part. Like, what order are they in? The third part I really love was, what does that mean for you, Jamal? I mean, when you say, because I mean, we all think neuro-linguistically, right? We think, when I think proved, that means something to me, but it might mean something quite different to you. I think when you say proved, what does that mean? Do you mean like academically proved? Do you mean proved in industries like yours? Proved by people like you? Proved in your geography? What does that mean? I'm really curious. Because if we're going to get to proof, I need to know it's a bit like being a lawyer. What sort of proof do you need? What is the burden of proof here? If I'm a lawyer, right? I'm in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. What's the proof needed to prove this, right? I love watching that trial. That was interesting.
That was
and
very, I feel like I was telling somebody that's like a master class on trauma, on so many things about the human psyche and what motivates us.
Why it was so interesting. It was, wow. I found myself tuning in, watching it each time, thinking, I'm nuts. This is crazy. But I love Johnny Depp. But I like that. So it's a burden of proof, because each side's got a burden of proof, right? So what burden of proof do you need? Or what does that mean to you? What? Because I want to understand that and make sure that what I may recommend to you is going to work for you. And the final part of the understanding is one I also really love is the fear piece. So you think, well, Jamal, when you're thinking about this or thinking about a more collaborative or client-centric approach to growth, what are you most concerned about? because we know decisions are made with a combination of pain and pleasure, right? And a lot we do more to avoid what we fear than to move towards what we desire. We all know that. But so, what do you want to avoid the most? What concerns you the most in having this conversation, or even considering this? Because I need to understand that to ensure that whatever I'm recommending or potentially recommending is not going to be something that is not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're my best salesperson, Jamal.
Totally.
I don't want it not to work. So, and that part of the conversation might take the whole conversation. All I'm doing is getting really being super curious. Same as in a coaching conversation.
Absolutely.
Super curious about how. Yeah, curious. Right.
Curious, and you're getting, and which gives you clarity as to ways you can serve them, right? Because you want to understand them. You want to understand what their fears are, what their burden of proof is, whatever they may need. You need to understand it before you can ever attempt to deliver.
Exactly. And quite often when I understand it, you understand it. Because in a coaching conversation, it's like, well, they don't understand how to fix this, right?
Sure. Totally.
So maybe if I understand it more, by my curiosity and my questions, you understand it more too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. That's how it works. So much of coaching is that just through gaining clarity through the questions and through listening, they're also gaining that clarity because they're now able to hear what they're saying, which they normally wouldn't say without that conversation.
Without that conversation. So I'm getting really curious, and there's no special questions to ask you. Just you want to know how they're thinking, what order it's in. You want to know what that means, and be really curious about that. And some of the people I find the most interesting are the people most different than me, that think differently to me. People that think like me aren't that interesting to me. People that think very differently are really, because a lot of what I've learned from clients teaching me to think about things in different ways. Mm-hmm. I mean, when I first came across client centricity, it was with I was working. Where was I? I was back in Singapore, and this was many years ago. And I was meeting a client I'd worked for in London. He happened to be there while I was there, and we met for lunch. And I said, "Oh, how are you?" I'll call him Bob. "How are you, Bob?" He said, "I'm really annoyed." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I just came to visit our local office here in Singapore. And all this senior executive parking is at the front of the building, and the customers have to go around the back." I said, "What sort of impression does that create to our customers that our parking is in the front? We should have our big customer parking sign at the front of the building because our customers come first." And I thought, wow, that's really cool. He was, and he said that we had a conversation around client centricity, customer centricity, and that began. How he thought about it began me thinking more about it, because he was teaching me. So then I've got the thinking on the table that I'm thinking, okay, I need to. So this conversation needs a conclusion or a recommendation. It needs something to go forward with. You think, okay, let's make a recommendation that, if it's possible, consistent with what I've just heard. And ideally, you're in a situation where you can recommend something consistent with how they're thinking, right?
Would that be the fifth? Would that be the fifth?
The fifth moment, yeah. Sorry, you have to keep me on track.
Yeah, but the fifth moment would be based on your understanding, this is how you want to direct them. Is that correct?
That's right. That you want to make that recommendation. That's moment number 5. Thank you for keeping me on track, sir. I need that.
No worries.
So, and it could be consistent with how they're thinking, which is great, or it could be inconsistent. You could be making a recommendation that's inconsistent with how they're thinking right now, because maybe the way they're thinking about their clients or their selling or their coaching, maybe that needs to change.
That's often the case. I have found that in coaching, the recommendation based upon understanding many times will kind of go against their grain of the tendency that they may have. That's limiting.
Yeah, because how they're thinking is giving them the results that they're getting, right? Like if I think about food and think I can eat as many cakes as I like, and my goal each day is to have as many calories as I like, I'm going to result in being a really big Peter, right? A really big guy. So I'm going to change how I'm thinking about food, or change how I'm thinking about my business. And part of your expertise as a coach or as a a person making recommendations is to recommend something in a collaborative spirit that leaves them better off. So it might mean you're recommending they change how they think. Say, look, Jamal, would you consider in terms of proof, like the burden of proof, would you consider like a recommendation or endorsement from the CEO of a company in your region, like a CEO in the UK that's I've worked with that was happy with the result? Would you consider that? Rather than looking at academic, because it's rare you'll find an academic a proof academically of something commercially, because most people in academia aren't in the commercial world.
Right.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So I might suggest something different, or a different way of making that decision based on what, because I'm working with decision makers all the time. Here's how other decision makers have made successful decisions in the space that we're talking about here, whether that's document management, warehousing, CRM, whatever it might be. So I make the then moment number 6 becomes when you agree, right? And this is the purpose of the whole conversation, is to reach an agreement. Now, when you make the recommendation, or you could recommend, look, Bob, or look, Jamal, look, Mary, it looks like what the sort of issues that you have aren't something I can help you with. And I'm really keen we had this conversation. I really thank you again for investing time in this, but it looks as if our approach is not going to work for you or in your environment. Or you might recommend that you can proceed. There might be something about what's being said which means the relationship can continue, which would be ideal. And most of the time, if you're with a senior person having that conversation, it's likely to progress. Otherwise, they wouldn't have met you in the first place. They do all that pre-qualifying first. So, and then you're going to get a yes to the recommendation. This is moment 6. You're going to get a yes, which I love. Get a no, which I love better, Jamal. The reason I love no's is because too many people pretend it's gonna persist. Being nice to each other, like you pretend it's gonna work, they pretend they're interested, and just slowly dies over time. I'd rather a no. I'd rather a deal-breaking no, because I don't want to waste my time or yours. I mean, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. I wouldn't talk this way to him or her.
Sure.
I'd be saying, you know what? I don't want to waste my time is like everyone else's, is really crucial. I want to spend it really optimally and talk to people that I can help. So a no's great, or maybe it's a maybe, maybe this work, but let's look at how we can translate that maybe into a yes that's worth having for both of us. So why don't we arrange a presentation, or why don't I take you through a case study of a similar organization facing a similar problem, and that might help us explore this in more depth. So there's a next step. Yeah.
Totally. So there's an agreement though on what that is, whether you can help, whether you can't help, or how do we move forward?
How do we progress this? That might take 2 or 3 conversations to progress it. And it might be the next step. See, I don't know what the next step's going to be, because I don't know how he's thinking before I walk into the room. So the next step could be different things. It might be, and I think that it might, yeah, so you go.
And I think that's probably where it becomes very different than maybe your traditional sales approach, because with a sales approach, there's, where it's going to go. But if it's collaborative, it's like, we don't know. We're going to discover what it could be in a way that's going to benefit everybody.
Exactly. And that's so true, Jamal. I mean, I was working, I won't say who it was. It's a globally recognized CRM brand, one of the biggest CRM brands in the world. And they asked me to come into what they call their mid-market. And I met with the CEO of mid-market sales. And she said, I said, so what's the problem? Like, what problem are we talking about here? We'll call her Mary. And she said, look, we're finding we get a lot of engagement early, and then the sales fall over at the end. And I said, why is that the case? And she said, because we don't engage the senior decision makers early enough in the decision-making process, because there's multiple people involved in these big decisions in big organizations. So because they had a very prescriptive sales process. And like, one of the problems, like I might be meeting with Catherine, and Catherine in the client, she might say, look, I really like this idea, Peter. I think a crucial next step would be to get Bob involved, because Bob is the HR guide. He needs to be across what we're doing to ensure that it fits culturally with us. So I think, great, let's arrange. We've got me and Bob to meet, or the three of us. No, the three of us can. So that's the next step. And then she starts taking control, which is what I want. I want us both to be invested in this. I want her as invested as me, not just me doing. If I'm pushing too hard, something's wrong, right? It's got to have these collaborative relationships, Jamal. They get their own energy.
There's a momentum. They got your energy.
They've got and you feel that momentum. And you're asking, and that's part of what could come out when you asked that question earlier, like, what are you most concerned about? Well, I'm most concerned about engaging Mary or engaging Jack. I said, well, why don't we get Jack in the tent and just explore what Jack's looking for and see whether what we're thinking about doing here will fit into like how Jack's thinking. I want them all involved early, because I want to know what those criteria are. Plus, I want to know whether it works. Because if Jack knows something that Mary doesn't know, that means this is not going to work. We're doomed. I want to know we're doomed early, not late. Right?
Totally.
Absolutely. And it's also just respect. I mean, no wonder these senior decision makers at this client I was talking to kill the sale late, because they weren't involved. The whole conversations were taking place. There's senior people in the organization, and they weren't involved in the conversation.
They're being left
out. Of course they're going to put an end to it. Of course they are. So I had to run programs in this organization, teaching these people how to get the senior people understand who they are and understand how to involve them in the conversation earlier. Because I'm talking about collaborative conversations, but there could be multiple conversations happening concurrently in one sale, if you like. Not just, it's very rare. It's one to one, unless it's very small.
Right.
You know,
totally.
I'm thinking more like enterprise level, where there's a lot of people and a lot of moving parts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that would be the case with, I mean, if you were talking to somebody that was at a governmental level, you know, you're really
so,
talking to one
even
person.
More so.
Even more so.
I try and avoid government, even though they're the biggest single buyer in the world. Sure. I try and avoid it because I find it just takes so
many
long.
Many moving
parts. It gets so diluted. I have worked in government, but it's not something that unless they can convince me otherwise, unless it's a really like a unique sort of department, I'm not keen working in that space. It's just too hard. Totally. It takes me too long. And unless they're paying me for all that time, I can't afford it. I can't afford to spend 7 months exploring it with them.
Totally.
Right? I can't afford that. I mean, I've got a family, and I've got a business, and I've got stuff. I've got golf clubs. I've got surfboards. I've got stuff to do, stuff to buy, kids to feed. Yeah.
Well, my hope or desire for the future is that we will have more leaders, people who are in leadership, of either multinational companies and also governments, that will understand these 6 points you laid out so well in the key moments of collaboration. If we could have leaders who understand this and we're passionate about this, just the way we conduct conversations internationally, I think it's a key to peace. I think it's a major key to avoiding conflict in the world.
Absolutely. If you think about like the crisis now in Ukraine and Russia, I mean, there's you think globally. If you think like environmental issues, you can think of any big like political issue, if you like. The way to solve it is by more collaboration, not less.
Not
like us and them, they're bad, we're good, they're the enemy, we're the good guys. It's about reaching what they in Congress, they call it reaching across the aisle and learning from your colleagues about how we can, if you're genuinely motivated. I think most Congress people and politicians are genuinely motivated. If you are genuinely motivated, that's the way forward. I wholeheartedly agree. I couldn't agree more, Jamal.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Peter, thank you so much. This has been a
pleasure.
So rich, ton of value here. And I just appreciate it. It's so important what you're talking about here. And I I thank you for your time and for your expertise and your generosity in coming on the show. Much appreciated.
Absolute pleasure, Jamal. I hope your skiing goes well. you know, in a
Thank you
little
very
while.
much.
And I genuinely hope that the listeners can just stop and reflect about how they can have more collaborative businesses, more collaborative lives, and benefit from the outcomes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for the listeners, where can people follow you, get a hold of some of your work? How can they stay in touch with you?
There's a ton of stuff I've got, like YouTube videos. You just type in Peter Anthony Consulting. Type that in, Peter Anthony Consulting. It's all one word, peteranthonyconsulting.com. And you'll find my YouTube, you'll find my Facebook and my website. There's a ton of content there. Or if you want to look at the book, it's called Collaborator. It rhymes with abracadabra. It's the magic of collaborative conversations. You can just Google this too. There's a ton of stuff there on it. Collaborator, or Peter Anthony Consulting. That's me. And I'd love to hear from you if you think we can have a conversation that could work for both of us.
Fantastic. So Collaboradabra is the name of the book.
Collaboradabra.
Peter Anthony Consulting. People can search that. peteranthonyconsulting.com is the website. All that information is there.
Perfect. Thank you, Jamal.
Thank you. Thank you. And guys, thank you so much for listening. And as always, look forward to hearing your comments, and we'll keep the dialogue going. Until next time, take care.